Hello, if you're new here, my name is Cassandra from Built on Roots Farm, and today I'm just filling some seed trays, and I thought that I would talk to you guys a little bit about what I found. So if you're new here, we're kind of on this path because of a health journey that's been unfolding over a lot of years. And I've recently come across some new information that I think is going to help me greatly. So while I'm filling these seedling trays, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I found and kind of the direction that I think I'm going to be going. And maybe this information will help other people who have been in a similar situation or know somebody in a similar situation. So I guess basically just a little background is I've actually been diagnosed through Western medicine with quite a few autoimmune diseases. And to have multiple autoimmune diseases is actually pretty rare. And I don't think I'm a rarity. So it's led us on a path, and as well as being, I guess, sort of left behind by the medical community, where they weren't really doing much to help me. So that started us on our health journey many years ago. So it first started after our first daughter was born. I guess it was sort of during her pregnancy, but we didn't know enough then. But so after our first daughter was born, I got really sick, and lack of energy, pains. When I was a child, I had been diagnosed with estrogen dominance and endometriosis, so which is also hugely linked to estrogen dominance. Anyways, and it's known to run through families, but my doctor just kept going back to that I was a new mom and I was young, and this is just how women feel after birth. They have a lot of pain, tired, fatigued, etc. So we continued on with our lives, just thinking that everything would get better. And we had our children close together in age, actually, our first children. So I became pregnant with our second child, who's also a girl. And during her pregnancy, I was still getting quite sick. I was sore and sick, and I was diagnosed with SPD. So that made the pregnancy and delivery a little more complicated. Both of our daughters were said to have IUGR, and so I was induced early with both girls. So with our second daughter, they said that she had dropped to a 3 percentile. So it was an emergency induction. And right after her delivery, I got really sick. I couldn't hold down food, and I was so tired. I was falling asleep, basically falling asleep while watching the girls. And so, yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I just wanted to what you're doing.
And so anyways, that led us on a path back to the medical community. And finally, eventually, after a lot of pushing on our part, I was losing weight incredibly fast, and I was unable to keep food down. So obviously that's why I was losing weight. And they just first kept saying the same as with our first daughter, that it's normal to feel like this. Your hormones need to go through a bunch of changes and regulate and balance back out and whatever. And so I've always been a smaller person. But the amount, how fast I was losing weight was alarming, even to our family members, and just my symptoms. And so I would have to look, but it was in the 20-pound mark that I lost within weeks. And I was really, really sick. And so I ended up going back to them, and I was going to them continuously, and they just kept saying, if the pain persists, come back in 3 months. If the pain persists, come back in 3 months. Meanwhile, I was having blood tests that were showing my nutrient levels as malnourishment. They were accusing me of having an eating disorder. They accused me of doing drugs, to which we did testing, basically to prove that I wasn't doing drugs. And we just had to keep pushing and fighting. And eventually, they did give me a CT scan, which showed that my liver was functioning at a really low percentage. Like, I would have to look. I have all this wrote down, but this is all off the top of my head right now. It was like 10% or 8% or something, functioning so low that it can't, your liver, when it's in a low functioning phase, it can't actually help support the breakdown of nutrients, mainly proteins, but other nutrients as well. It's a very key player in your digestive system. And so that was my problem, was my liver. And they didn't really have anything for me. My doctor was basically content to just let me sit there and wait. And if it got to the point where it was so bad that I needed a liver transplant, then that was the route that we were going to go. And it was my dad, actually, who got me to go to an alternative medicine practitioner. So he was a live blood analysis, and he worked with herbs. And he would take a sample of your blood, and he would read the dry samples, but as well as view it under a microscope for the live blood, see what your blood was doing and how it was, what was affecting it. They can see all kinds of things from your blood. Anyway, he confirmed, because we didn't tell him about any of the medical tests. I was honestly a little skeptical at the beginning. And so I told him my symptoms and whatever, but we didn't tell him what the medical community had said. And he confirmed that it was my liver. But I was so far gone at that point that he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to help me. And so he wouldn't give us any guarantees or anything like that, but he did say that he would try to help. So I was put onto a whole regimen of herbs and stuff. And for a while, I didn't really seem to improve much at all. And then I did start improving. So that was a long process, because it just takes a really long time when you're at that state where you basically are almost dead. You can't just turn around really fast, right? And I'm not saying almost dead to try to hype up the situation or anything. I was literally like 83 pounds. I had dropped into the high 70 pounds. I had no nothing. Like, I wasn't strong enough to carry either of my daughters. One was a toddler, one was an infant. I couldn't watch them on my own. I would literally fall asleep standing up. I would fall asleep sitting down. There was just no nutrient in my body or body fat to be broken down to sustain a quality of life. So it was very serious. And he did help me, and it, like I said, it was a long journey, but I eventually did get better. And I still have to be careful about certain things. My liver will never function like a normal person's liver, which is 80% to 100%. But it's just something we have to stay on top of and keep an eye on. And anyway, so there was that whole liver issue was the first thing. Medically, they diagnosed it as hereditary liver failure. Now, I couldn't find a hereditary link to it at all on either side of my family, but that's what they said it was, so that's what we went with, which would be semi like an autoimmune disease, right? And so then from there, as I recovered and started feeling better, we decided to have another child. And so we had our first son. And again, during his pregnancy, nearing the end, I got really sick. And then I got really sick after his delivery. And I was then diagnosed with Addison's disease, which is also an autoimmune disease, and it's when your body attacks your own adrenal glands. So your adrenals are linked to your sex hormones and everything like that, right? So just it's all tying back to something here. That's why I keep mentioning different things. And so I guess I should have mentioned, when I was younger, in high school, I was also diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which is another autoimmune disease. And so from him, it took me a long time, because pregnancy, with the fluctuation in the hormones, and it's a lot harder. Pregnancy is really hard on women's livers. So I had a period of recovery after him as well, while we were dealing with what they said was Addison's disease. And at this point, we were dealing with everything naturally. Like, I wasn't taking any Western medicine, pharmaceuticals. So I recovered after him, and a few years later, life was going good. So we decided to have our fourth child. And this is where this story kind of really ramps up in my journey. So while I was pregnant with our fourth, again, I got sick, but I actually didn't get sick closer till the end of his pregnancy. But at the beginning of his pregnancy, I was diagnosed with estrogen positive cancer, so ER positive cancer. And my options medically were to have a medical abortion so that treatment could be done, or to just sit on it. There was no other options. Just wait and see how it goes, or get the medical abortion. So I'm not saying people shouldn't get a medical abortion, so please don't take this the wrong way if you've had one or you would consider one, but it wasn't right for us. I should also mention that I was already 4.5 months pregnant, so I was already past what a lot of people refer to as the okay phase to get an abortion, when there's still just a mass of cells in some people's views. So I was already pretty progressed into my pregnancy, into the second trimester. And it was just not optional for us. So it also wasn't just optional to sit around and hope for the best, especially after my doctor was telling me that I was basically gonna make my husband a widower and orphan my other 3 children that I had if I didn't get the medical abortion. So again, we went the natural route with that, and I actually pulled my raw DNA so I could see all of my mutation levels in the different detox pathways and everything like that, and try to figure out, because I was having this repeating pattern of things that are very linked to the sex hormones, estrogen mainly, endometriosis, estrogen dominance, the adrenals. I had also been diagnosed when I was younger with hyperthyroidism, which your thyroid and your adrenals and your ovaries, they all work together. It's called the oat axis. Anyway, if one thing's out of whack on the oat axis, usually the other things are as well, or they will be within time. So you kind of have to heal the whole system. You have to heal the 3 different parts of the system as one. And so a lot of my links were just always going back to the hormones, estrogen mainly. And so we did a bunch of different things for the cancer, and I did heal from it naturally, and I did get Western medicine all clear. My doctor was surprised. He basically said it was amazing and a miracle and whatever. And I'm not totally against Western medicine. I do believe that they have a place in our society and in our lives. It's just not, in my opinion, in everyday healthcare. But they have left me basically to die a few times. So I do have somewhat feelings around that. But that's, for me, myself, we have plenty of family who uses Western medicine. And I support those family members in every way that I can, and I'm never, I guess, degrading to them. I support their choices. It's their life; they can make their choice. And so I just wanted to make that clear, because I'm not here just to bash the medical community. So after the cancer, again, I was having a very hard time with my liver and my gut, and I actually went raw vegan while I was healing the cancer, and that's when I had the most improvements, along with all the other things that we were doing. And like I said, I pulled that raw DNA, and so I found out I actually have quite a lot of mutations in my detox pathways. I also have VDR mutations, which is vitamin D. And so I knew from young that I have problems with iron Bs, like B12, I don't store. And vitamin D, I was always chronically low on vitamin D, even while supplementing. So I found out that I have all of these different mutations in my detox pathways. So, which leads back to the liver, right? And so like your MTHFR detox, that is your liver. So it made sense. And just a bunch of these issues. MTHFR is also linked to some autoimmune diseases. And it's also linked to some cardiovascular diseases, depending on what type of mutations you have, and if they're double mutated or single. So then, after our second, I guess I forgot to mention, I also had a lot of kidney issues. So I was, my kidneys were bleeding. I was getting chronic infections without symptoms, though. Like, I wouldn't have symptoms of a bladder infection. It would just go straight to a kidney infection, and I would start passing blood. And it wasn't stones, it was just an infection. So I was basically on a lot of antibiotics, which were just destroying my gut, right? And after 6 months of antibiotics, and I was still having flare-ups where I couldn't pass urine. I was just bleeding. We went natural with that as well. And I was able to get that cleared up. And thankfully, I haven't really had much other kidney issues. I did have a little bit last year, a little bit of kidney issues. And I did pass a kidney stone, but we pretty much managed my kidney issues. And we've been working with my hormones and all of these different things we've been working on through all of the years, naturally. So then, leading into the last couple of years, I have had positive AMA blood tests and suspected by the Western medical community as lupus. So that would make sense because, like I said at the beginning of this video, not a lot of people have multiple autoimmune diseases. And over the years, they've been telling me I have all of these different autoimmune diseases. Whereas with lupus, when it's triggered, it can actually attack pretty much any system in your body, right? So it is often misdiagnosed in the beginning years as a different issue. So I never finished doing all the different Western medical testing to get 100% diagnosis of it. So lupus is it's linked to a lot of different things. Your hormones are one of them. It's more common in women than it is in men, and it seems to fit a bunch of different areas. For myself personally, the rashes that I get were diagnosed as eczema again when I was really little, so that's what I grew up thinking they were, right? But now it's actually ESL, erythema, systematic systematic erythemus lupus. And the rashes are actually quite similar, and they can often be misdiagnosed for other dermatological rashes. And so that's been where we've been at lately, has been with treating what is suspected as lupus the past couple of years. And so I've noticed a big uptick with certain things that we've been doing, and I've been taking like a natural plant-based steroid because that's one of the main treatments for lupus is steroids, and it does help me. So then I guess where I'm leading with this is into ATIs, amylase trypsin inhibitors, which are commonly found in grains, whole grains. It's not just wheat, it's found in other grains as well. They are starting to do a lot more studies on it. There is actually quite a few animal studies that you can find. So they can basically, in these mice studies, it shows that they can, by feeding high AM or ATIs, the mice get a disease that's similar in symptoms to lupus. And so that got me started thinking, and what if all my issues haven't actually been autoimmune diseases? What if they've been triggered by something else that's mimicking an autoimmune disease? So we decided that I have quite a few food issues, so that's part of the reason why we're living this life, is growing our own vegetables. And Like some of the vegetables from stores I can't eat, but if they're homegrown, I can eat them. I can't eat most meats from a store, but if they're homegrown and fed fermented grains, if they're a grain-fed animal like poultry or grass-fed, grass-finished, I'm perfectly fine with those types of meats. And there is some studies that show fermenting grains and then feeding those fermented grains to pigs actually changes the protein makeup of the cells. It causes the pigs proteins to express in a different manner than what they do if they're not fed fermented grains. So there is some studies that you guys can go on Google Scholar and find to back up some of this information that I'm saying. Anyway, that's what's kind of led us more and more into this direction of life that we're going. So I decided that I was going to start eating a carnivore diet. So eating a 100% carnivore diet is kind of similar just to like the benefits you would get from keto or zero fiber diets. So in your gut, there's these, they're called villi, and they're like fingers. And in a person with autoimmune diseases, the villi is not the same as it is in a person that doesn't have autoimmune diseases and is quote unquote healthy. And those villi actually help absorb the nutrients from your system, right? So a lot of people with like leaky gut and stuff like that, it can lead into these other autoimmune diseases, including cancer. Our bodies are actually formulated in a way that our own immune system should attack and kill mutated cells. And if our own immune systems are attacking and killing those mutated cells, it can never get to a stage of cancer. So if you have cancer, you have a problem with your immune system. There's just no denying that. It is what it is. And since 80% of your immune system is created in your gut, most people who have cancer and who have autoimmune diseases have bad guts. We need to heal our guts, right? Lots of people just refer to it as leaky gut or whatever. But 80% of your immune system is created in your gut. So, I mean, most diseases come back to your gut, and your gut comes back to the foods you are consuming and eating, right? So anyways, I decided I would do this carnivore diet so I could heal those villi. You have to have zero fiber in order to heal the villi in your gut, and it can take about 30 days. Like if you're not cheating on it and stuff like that, eating foods you shouldn't be, it can take 30 days to heal the villi in your gut. So I started the carnivore diet, and most of all of my issues went away, like within days. Now, most people report it takes a week or 2 weeks before they start seeing any improvements. I think part of the reason why I've seen a lot of improvements, even right at the beginning, is because I just don't have a lot of fat stores. So I don't have a lot that's storing those toxins and those nutrients that aren't good for my system, right? So increasing my body fat is something that I've been trying to do over the years, because I only have like an 8% body fat, which for most women, unless you're like a top athlete, that's not enough to run your internal organs. Like you should have between 10 to 15% body fat, and that's just needed for the actual process of your internal organs. Keep your heart pumping, your lungs working, everything like that. I get winded very easy. I have to eat frequently. All of those different kinds of things, right? So I was a little concerned because lots of people report they lose weight on the carnivore diet, and that's not the direction I was trying to go. And so I was keeping an eye. We have a scale that it's a more expensive scale, but it reads your body fat, your water weight, stuff like that. And so I was going to keep an eye on it. And I dropped a percentage in the first few days, but I hadn't really lost weight. So I wasn't overly concerned. I was kind of feeling winded when we would go, like when I would have to go do chores and stuff. It was a struggle to do my regular things. I just didn't really have the energy to do it. And so I was just going to try to push through for the 30 days. And then, as I already mentioned, can eat our own meat, but we ate meat from a store. So therefore, it most likely was not fermented grain fed. And I know this meat bugs me. But when you start doing an elimination diet, and then you bring something back in that bugs you, your reaction can be like 100 times worse. Like it can be really, really bad. And of course, that's what happened with me. So I got really sick, and I started losing weight really fast. I got erythemus rash that started spreading across my body. I still have it, but and I started losing weight, and it didn't seem like I just couldn't keep up to eating. I just kept losing weight. And since I am small and I have these problems, it's not okay for me to lose a few pounds in a week. Like, it's just not manageable. I have the opposite problem that most people have, but it is still a problem and a valid concern. But my biggest concern is I dropped from 8% body fat to 4% body fat. And I could, from this reaction that was induced by eating meat that wasn't fed fermented grains. And so I couldn't stay awake. I would be awake for a few hours, and then I would just fall asleep. And so I was sleeping a lot during the day, and thankfully it's winter, so it's my husband's seasonal time, and so he's been home, obviously, so the kids have been taken care of, meals have been made, everything like that, because he's amazing like that. And I was hit a really low night where I was in incredible amounts of pain, and I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't sit still, but I also couldn't move, and so it was really bad, and I was almost considering going to the hospital. And I was on my phone, and like, I use Google Scholar all the time. I've always been interested in the medical field, and even as a younger kid. And I actually wanted to be a vet, but anyway. And I took medical transcription course in college, and I just really am interested in how the human body works. And so I use Google Scholar a lot anyways to read studies. And so I was on Google Scholar, and I come across these mice studies where I was looking up things for lupus to see what I could do, because I assumed I was having like a lupus crisis, like a really bad lupus reaction. And I started coming across these mice studies where they've induced basically like a systematic disease in these mice that pretty much mimics lupus. And they're doing this by the ATIs in wheat, the amylase trypsin inhibitors. And so my brain started turning, and how they can pull these mice out, or help the mice to survive these reactions. is through some of the stuff that we already had in the house and that I had been using for other health related issues. And so anyways, the cogs started turning and two and two started being put together and making sense. So I actually took indole 3-carbinol, which is it's from plants, but it will block your estrogen receptors. So it goes onto your estrogen receptors, and then that tricks your body into thinking it has enough estrogen, so it slows down the production of estrogen. It was one of the main things I took when I had estrogen receptor positive cancer. And then there's lysine. There's a few other things that we had in the house, and so I took those, and my reaction started to decrease. So then I started thinking, well, if I can eat birds here that are fed fermented grains, but I have problems with birds from here that weren't fed fermented grains, then maybe there's something to it. Now, I can't find any studies. They all say that when the ATIs are consumed by an animal, it doesn't store in the fat or in the meat of the animal. It's broken down in the process. So I honestly have no good reason to tell you besides those studies that show feeding the fermented grains change the protein expression makeup in pigs. Other than that study, I have no good reason why fermented grains work for me to feed our animals, and then I have no problems with the meats. I honestly don't know. That's just the experience, right? That's just what I know to be true because I've experienced it, and I do experience it. And so I started looking at other things that I know to affect me. So we eat a lot of egg noodles because I know regular noodles bug me. I had thought that it was starches, potato starches mainly. However, I can eat potatoes from our own garden and not have as bad as not as bad of a reaction as store-bought potatoes. So I just started thinking of all these different things over the years that affect me and bug me, and all the different autoimmune diseases, and all of the symptoms and the pains and everything can come back, link back to these ATIs and the villi in my gut being destroyed. Even the doctor saying that I had malnutrition levels. Those villi are needed to extract the nutrients from your food and pass it through your intestine, right? But I couldn't continue with the carnivore diet either because I was just losing too much body fat and too much weight, just like 2 weeks in. And there's no way I would have made it another 2 weeks. So I did start adding back in foods. So now I'm just avoiding anything that has ATIs in it, which is not just wheat. It's all pretty much all the whole grains. So even oats have ATIs in them, but they're in a very small amount. So as soon as I started taking, when I first went back to eating, I was eating ATIs. When I was stopping the carnivore diet to try to gain weight and fat back, and my condition was getting worse. And so as soon as I stopped consuming ATI foods, now I'm getting better, and I'm getting better at like a pretty fast rate. So I've already gained over half of the weight I lost back. And I've also gained over half of body fat percentage that I lost. I've also gained half of that back. And so mentally, I'm more awake, no more pain. Like, I don't have that much pain. I'm still having some pain from the reaction that I had, but my typical pains that I usually live with are getting lower every day. More energy back. I'm not falling asleep during the day anymore. Little less winded when I'm doing things. So I am recovering, and it's just from removing ATIs from my diet. So anyways, the ATIs can pretty much link to everything that I mentioned. So whole grains have now I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, lignans in them. And lignans are phytoestrogens. So they're known to boost estrogen levels in humans. So it's not just the ATIs, it could have also been these phytoestrogens in the whole grains, and those could have linked to pretty much everything that I've had going on in my whole 34 years of life. So I'm quite excited and interested to see how this is going to play out for me. I'm hoping it's kind of the key that we've been missing, because it seems like my story has been, as soon as we get a handle on one thing, something else happens. And like I said, I'm not a rarity. There's no way I believe I have all of these autoimmune diseases, because it's just not common to have more than one or two. And so I honestly think that this could be the key that we've been missing. I can eat fermented grains. I can eat sourdough, and I don't react to it. And I have tried to go gluten-free, even though I tested negative for gluten sensitivity and celiac disease. I guess that would have been like, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. So, but the ATIs aren't in the gluten per se. But lots of people who eat a gluten-free diet will see improvements, even if it's the ATIs that they were having reactions to, because you're consuming a lot fewer of the same foods that have gluten in them, right? And yeah, I don't know. I just thought I would get on here and tell you guys about the ATIs and how they, just look into them. If you have food allergies, or you have hormone issues, autoimmune disease, ATIs are known to not only bring on autoimmune diseases, but also progression of the disease. So if you're already you are already diagnosed with autoimmune diseases, consuming ATIs in your diet will progress those autoimmune diseases at a faster rate than if you were not consuming ATIs in your diet. And then for bringing them on, so autoimmune diseases are they're in your genetics, right? So it's like flipping a switch. It's the same for it. It's the same for cancers. Like, I guess the easiest one most people would know is like the BRCA gene. It's known to protect women against cancer while that gene is not flipped on, while that gene is not expressing. Once that gene is flipped on and expressing, that's when you actually end up with the cancer, right? So it's kind of the same thing with autoimmune diseases. They're kind of sitting in your body. They just might not be expressing or turned on. Like, so that's why you have flares and downs and flares and downs. Your downs are when they're not, your normals are when they're not expressing, and your flares are when something has caused those genes to turn on to express, and that's when you'll have the reactions and the bad symptoms and everything like that. So ATIs are known to do that with autoimmune diseases. So they've been linked to actually quite a bit of autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, MS, asthma, lupus, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and inflammatory bowel diseases. So like celiac disease, stuff like that, or colitis. Sorry, I meant colitis. And yeah, they'll just worsen your already existing inflammatory diseases. So chronic inflammatory diseases, the ATIs can worsen that for you. There's studies that show that ATI-free diets can help treat a variety of serious immunological disorders. So some of the common symptoms of the ATIs is headaches, migraines, stuffy nose that just kind of never seems to go away, or is brought on more so when you're eating, sneezing, asthma, hives, other skin rashes, like I had mentioned, eczema, but you can get other dermatological rashes, nausea, cramping, vomiting, diarrhea, joint pain. So like I already said, it makes rheumatoid arthritis worse. But even people who don't have autoimmune diseases and are reacting to ATIs can have severe joint pains. So those are the common symptoms. So yeah, I'm not sure. I don't really have too much else to say besides Indol is one of the things that I was taking. And I think that this might possibly be the link for myself with the fermented grain-fed animals and non-fermented grain-fed animals. Indol is from plants. And so in the studies of both sheep and pigs, when they were fed fermented feeds, they actually stored more indole in their fat tissue than the unfermented grain-fed groups. So indole actually is known to work for your body against certain autoimmune diseases. Like I had been taking it because of the suspected lupus diagnosis. And so there's like indole 3-carbinol or just indole. So there's a few different ones you can get. But anyway, I think that might be the link with the fermented grain-fed animals opposed to the not fermented grain-fed animals. And maybe just having that higher levels of it in the animals that I'm consuming is maybe what helps me. I'm not sure. But I do think now that they're doing more studies about the ATIs, because they are making the connection with them in the North American diets and how they're affecting people. So they are starting to do a lot more studies on them. Hopefully they will find better connections for us moving forward. But for right now, all I can say is it works for me to ferment feed our meat animals, and if they're not fermented fed, I have really bad reactions where I'll lose a significant amount of weight, I'll lose a significant amount of body fat, and I'm just done. Like I literally cannot keep myself awake. There's nothing left in my body to keep going, right? So removing the ATIs and seeing a significant improvement, and for my lupus flare to be going away within days makes me really believe that the ATIs were the problem all along, and not lupus, and not rheumatoid arthritis, and not all of these other issues that I've had. And being that they're also xenoestrogens, increasing estrogen levels in my body, and I've had estrogen dominance and endometriosis and ER positive cancer. Those are all from too high levels of estrogen in your body. Your body's overproducing estrogen, and that leads to some serious issues because you have an imbalance going on. And so I'm quite hopeful that this is finally the last piece to this puzzle. And hopefully, if anybody else has been having similar autoimmune issues or chronic inflammatory diseases, ATIs are linked to chronic inflammation in the body, that maybe just removing the ATIs from your diet or fermenting your grains, so having like sourdough bread instead of regular bread, will be helpful for you. Thank you.